Welcome to our participants today. We thank you for joining us for the CFIA Employment Transition Policy Information Session. My name is Felipe Godoy. I am part of the member engagement team here at PIPS. I'm also joined by my colleague Niall Richardson, as well as Dean Tosick and Stephanie Ehler from our National Policy Office. To begin, we'd like to take some time to respectfully acknowledge that our office, located in Ottawa, is on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Before this land was a city, it was and remains a place for the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, whose presence here reaches back over 8,000 years. As settlers, it is our responsibility to educate ourselves on the history of the First Peoples, to learn how to be respectful of their culture, to acknowledge their pain and our part in it. This journey of understanding is uncomfortable, but part of discovering our past and how we continue to benefit from it is the duty to grow and to change in order to want to do better. Working towards change, we can be hopeful that our journey guides us to a peaceful, inclusive, and respectful future, one where we can hope to have done the work required to be seen as guests of this great land and its First Peoples, and to be part of their community. If you have started the journey of learning whose territory you work and live on, we invite you to make that acknowledgement in the Q&A. At the beginning of our webinar, we'd like to provide you with our equity statement, which clearly outlines the expectations for participants. If you could please take a moment to review the statement, the link is in the chat box. As noted, the Professional Institute of the Public Service of Canada strives to create a climate that is respectful, safe, and inclusive, where we all feel welcome and valued, and where we are supported to make our contributions and support others to make theirs. We thank you for being part of this inclusive space. Now, let's go over some key information about Zoom. Due to the size of the group, we have muted your computers to ensure we have the best sound quality for everyone participating and for those who will watch later. Please use the Q&A icon in Zoom to send a message if you have any questions or technical issues during the webinar. Today, we're going to discuss the employment transition policy and how it may affect you as a CFIA member. We will have a question and answer period at the end of our session. I will now pass it over to Dean to begin today's information session. Dean?
Thank you, Felipe, for that warm introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. So the purpose of today's presentation is to go over the CFIA employment transition policy in the context of workforce reorganization. And the purpose is to give you an overview of your rights and obligations, and give you some practical tips. So the idea is to go over the presentation high level and then ensure that we have enough time for your question period. So without further ado, we'll begin the presentation with the next slide. Thank you. So what is employment transition? So it's a structured process the employer follows when positions are eliminated or reduced. It further explains how employees are notified, supported, and treated fairly throughout the change. It focuses on reducing involuntary job loss through redeployment, retraining, and other measures. It provides for financial and career transition support if you leave the public service. So now this is negotiated. It's part of your collective agreement. So the policy itself is incorporated. And so you can avail your rights of the collective agreement, and we'll see further, with respect to how the exercise is unfolded, and how you're protected in terms of how you can avail yourself of your rights. And the policy also explicitly states what your obligations are. So we will go into the further detail in terms of how it operates. Next slide, please. Okay, so who is covered? So the policy, even though it's a policy incorporated in your collective agreement, applies to all indeterminate members, PIPS members, within the CFIA. So the three groups are included. However, excluded are the non-represented staff. Excluded employees at the group and level are governed by the collective agreement, but aren't afforded representational rights because they're excluded. Non-represented staff entitled to same provision. So the collective agreement applies to them, but they're not entitled to representation because based on their functions, either because of their supervisory role or because they're in a step in the grievance process, they're excluded. But the collective agreement and the policy still applies to them. Unfortunately, the policy does not apply to term employees. So there is no, the purpose of the policy is to ensure continued employment. Unfortunately, term employees do not have those guarantees. Next slide, please. So what is the process? So a high level, the employment transition process, the first step is affected status. So you would be receiving a letter from the CFIA stating that your position is affected. And we'll see later on, affected doesn't mean that you will end up having to lose your job or having to compete for your job. It just means that your position, that your work has been identified as affected. And it may remain a status quo because the employer may change their mind and say, although your status is affected, we decided not to abolish your position or the work. So affected status does not trigger any rights yet. It's only once, and we'll see later, once you're not in receipt of a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, then we'll see what options would apply to you. Also, it includes for those who want to leave the public service, a voluntary departure program for, and if there are more than 5 employees in the unit, organization, or section, wherever the work is being affected, if there are more than 5 employees, they can volunteer for the departure program. So to avoid having to, go through the process. So these are for folks who want to leave the public service. And then we will get into further detail in terms of what does this encapsulate. So, and then after step 2, so the next step is the assessment and selection, and that's only if needed. So if they determine that the work is not being affected or is being affected, sorry, there will be an assessment and selection process, and we'll get into those details. And after this assessment and selection process is over, and folks who have not been able to retain a position, they'll be declared surplus. And then we'll get into those, the definitions and what those rights and obligations entail. Next slide, please. So affected status is the first step. So essentially your position may be eliminated, not confirmed yet. Written notification from management, formal letter. So it has to be in writing. It can't be, you're hearing rumors or, at the water cooler, you're hearing people talking about it, management talking about it informally. Until it's formalized in writing, your status quo prevails. People ask, well, when is PIPS notified of positions that may be affected? Under the CFIA policy, we are notified the same day. So we don't know in advance whether your position may be impacted, how many will be impacted. According to the collective agreement, we are notified the same day. It may happen a little earlier, but from my experience, even with the core public service, the collective agreement speaks to 24 hours or 48 hours, and we are usually informed late, just before the deadline. So during the affected status, you have access to career counseling, resume help, job search assistance, workshops, interview preparation. So that's all available in the event that your position may be impacted and you need to determine next steps. And for those who want to remain in the public service, they will have access to career counseling and whatnot. And then there's a monetary allotment for that we will see later on. So the status lasts until final decision. So that means it could be indeterminate. So if I get an affected letter and says, Dean, your position is affected until I get further notice, status quo prevails. I continue working same level, group and level. I continue operating, doing as I have been doing so far. Salary benefits continue. Nothing changes. If the position is retained, the affected status ends immediately. So if the employer comes back and say, we're ensuring that your position will be maintained, all is good. You can move on, and that's obviously the ideal situation. Or unfortunately, the other option, if your position is not retained, management confirms elimination, and position becomes surplus, and the voluntary departure program may be applicable to your situation. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the voluntary departure program? So it's offered when 5 or more employees in a work unit are affected. So volunteers, volunteers leave with transition benefits, remaining jobs are protected. So essentially you want to, either you want to pursue another career, you want to pursue a different path, like in terms of education and whatnot. This would be, this would be an option for you. And the idea is to preserve, positions that, to avoid having to go through a formal process to protect jobs. So you will be entitled to the benefits afforded to someone who would qualify for the volunteer departure program. And we'll get into the mechanics a little later. For PIPS members, volunteers becoming opting employees. So if you're not in receipt of a guarantee of a job offer, you would become an opting employee. And we'll get into the mechanics of those as well. Next slide, please. Okay. So assessment and selection. So those who want to remain in the public service, will remain with the CFIA, or also will have to undergo this assessment and selection process. So the start is affected employees, right, by group and level. They have to. So it has to be, similar work, group and level. We can't have different classifications, just different type of work. It has to be, it's done so equitably to ensure that everyone has a fair chance. It defines assessment criteria, the competencies, conditions of employment, assess each affected employee. And then, you compare the results against the criteria. So it's a formal exercise that management will have you undergo. And they will set the criteria for the testing, whether it is done by, whether it's a verbal assessment via interview, whether it's going to be a written assessment, like a test, whether they're going to check your references. So that's left to the discretion of the manager. However, we need to ensure that it's applied consistently, right? They cannot apply different standards for different groups or for different exercises, right? Or, they can't say, Dean, we're gonna check your references. We're gonna have you conduct a written exam. We're gonna also proceed with an oral interview. If they do that for me, they have to do it for everyone else, right? They can't pick and choose. It has to be applied consistently. And that's where we would be able to challenge them. And if we find out that there are irregularities in the process, we would be able to denounce it. So at the end of this process, obviously, the decision, once you go through the process, the exercise in question, either you're retained in a position, or a position is declared surplus, and then we'll see what consequences that entails. Next step, please. Next slide, I think. So this step 4 is a surplus declaration. There are 2 paths, right? So step 1, position is declared surplus. Okay. Management decides if there's a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. If there is a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, Then path A, surplus, you become surplus with a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. So that's the ideal circumstance. And you can remain surplus until you get the guarantee of a reasonable job offer, right? So your position, you continue working as is until you get that guarantee of a reasonable job offer. So that's the ideal situation. If there's no guarantee of a reasonable job offer, then the path B is surplus with no guarantee of a reasonable job offer. No guarantee of a reasonable job offer, you automatically become an opting employee. Right? So it's either you have a guarantee of reasonable job offer, and if you don't, then you become an opting employee. And we'll see what that entails. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the process. So surplus with guarantee of a reasonable job offer. What that means is so you get your guarantee of a reasonable job offer, provided reasonable job offer at same or lower level, and we'll see that a lower level can be offered, including then that will kick in your salary protection provisions. So it's possible that a guarantee of reasonable, it may be deemed a reasonable job offer to be offered a lower level position. It depends on the circumstances. For some folks, depending again on the offer, it may be considered reasonable or it may not be considered reasonable. So again, it's very fact specific, but it allows the employer, and in a sense, it's another option, although not ideal. Being in a lower level position, you will still be salary protected, but you still don't have the same benefits as your former group and level. And then we'll get into that. But the idea is to expand the possibilities of retaining employment, and that's why the option of a lower level is possible. So then, with the guarantee of reasonable job offer, indefinite surplus priority status remains until appointed to the new position. Once you receive the guarantee of reasonable job offer and you're appointed, you remain in indefinite surplus status, priority status. You continue full salary benefits and meaningful work, continue often in another section or branch, if that's the case. But again, when they offer you a guarantee of reasonable job offer, they have to look at your personal competencies, right? And you have to meet the essential qualifications of the position, essentially. But they need to assess you against the objective criteria of the position. And remember, they're targeting, I shouldn't say target, they're looking at targeting positions, not individuals. And it does happen that individuals may feel targeted, whether it's because it happens, whether it's done in bad faith, or for example, I sometimes you think of the example, wait a second, I'm the only steward in the workplace, and yet they're targeting me. It's the exception, not the rule, but it can happen. And if you do feel targeted for whatever reason, whether because you were bullied by your there's potential for discrimination. They don't want to accommodate you. They feel that, oh, you have accommodation measures in place. They're like, oh, that's too much. They don't want to deal with it. No, they have a legal obligation to look at your particular circumstances. If you need an accommodation, whether it's through the staffing exercise, for example, if you have mobility issues, if you need aids, visual aids, they need to provide you with those resources, right? So if something goes wrong, in your opinion, feel free to reach out to your steward or your regional representative, PIPS representative. They will help you. But the point I'm trying to make here is that they need to look at your particular circumstances, right? And they need to make sure that there's a fit. They need to look at it. If there's a retraining opportunity, they need to provide it to you. For example, if you're going in the same line of work, but you need a little, to brush up on the layest advances, they need to offer you training, offer you courses to get you up to speed, right? So it's not just a paper exercise. They really need to look at you, your experience, your education, and what you can offer. So that's the point I wanted to make here. So yeah, if you accept a reasonable job offer, you're appointed. If you refuse a reasonable job offer, laid off in 6 months. And there's no transition support measure options, which we will explain a little further. So depending on the offer, I mean, if you deem it unreasonable, depending again on the circumstances, we can challenge it. We can file a grievance. But again, it's very fact specific. But refusing a reasonable job offer can potentially, it would lead to a layoff based on the right wording of the agreement. But again, it's subject to context, subject to the situations. If it's deemed unreasonable, PIPS will assist you in challenging it. Next slide, please. Okay, so Path B, if you don't receive a guarantee or reasonable job offer, you become an opting employee. So that means you don't have a guarantee or reasonable job offer. Management cannot identify a suitable vacant position at your level or lower level. Opting period, you have 120 days to choose how to proceed. And we tell folks to take the time they need to make an informed decision, because depending on the options, again, it may be, it would be irrevocable. So once you select an option, and the employer, grants it, I mean, there's no reason not to grant it. Changing your mind afterwards may be difficult. So that's why you want to make sure you have all the information, whether to consult a financial advisor, whether to consult PIPS, pension and benefits, the pension center, because there may be impacts. There will be impacts on your benefits, depending, again, on the option you choose. So you need to make a decision within the 120 days. But we recommend to take your time to ensure that you have all the information necessary. And we always say there's no right decision, it's what's right for you. So that's during the opting period. You have alternation, which we'll get into further detail later on. That's when you want to exchange positions. So I'm an alternate. I want to leave the public service, and we'll see, I've been in the public service for a while. I may be entitled to a pension waiver, and I want to alternate with an opting employee who wants to stay in the public service. So we would alternate. I would leave the public service as a non-affected employee, and the affected employee normally who hasn't received the guarantee of a reasonable job offer will be able to alternate, right? And then we'll get into what that entails. If you don't choose an option within 120 days, your default option is option A, 12-month surplus priority. We'll get into its definition shortly. Next slide, please. Okay, so the three options, the overview: position declared surplus, no guarantee of reasonable job offer, you become an opting employee, you have 120 days. Option A is 12-month surplus priority, stay employed and seek a new position. So if I want to remain in the public service, I want to change, or with the CFIA, or in the public service in general, I will choose option A. So what that means is I have 12 months to secure alternate employment, whether I am successful in a competition or whether I choose alternation. I will alternation as another option to stay in the public service. I have 12 months to do so. And that means, my salary continues, work continues, but at the end of the 12-month period, if I don't secure a position, I will be laid off. So that's the risk with choosing option A. Option B is a transition support measure, which would lead to a resignation, but you will receive a financial package if you choose option B. Option C is the education allowance. So you would get the transition support measure, and we'll see later it's based on your years of service, plus an education funding. So to pay for your books, your tuition, and we'll see later on how much that is. And then you have two options. You can either remain on leave without pay for 2 years, you resign and take your transition support measure and your education funding, or you can study for 2 years and go on leave without pay. So that's another option. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go study, maybe change directions in my career, or pursue higher education, or go into technical trade. The idea is to enhance whether it's to stay in the public service or to go elsewhere. But generally, when you take the leave without pay, the idea is to hopefully resume employment in the public service after the 2-year period. So at all stages, we invite you to consult a PIPS representative, a financial planner, anyone, because of the financial consequences. So it's important that you understand really what the impact is from a financial perspective. Next option, please. Next slide, sorry. Right. So option, the 12-month, we discussed it, surplus priority starts after the 120 opting period ends. So within, after the 120 days, you have 12 months. You would be entitled to any unused opting days to extend the surplus period up to 60 months. So essentially, if you have any credit, comp time, vacation, you can extend up to 60 months. So you get an extra 4 months to try to secure your employment. So that's good. You continue to receive full salary benefits, and pension contribution continue as per usual. Next slide, please. So during the surplus period, management assigns meaningful work aligned with your skills. It could be projects, temporary assignments, acting opportunities, to build experience and networks. You receive priority referrals to vacancies at same or lower level within commuting distance or with relocation. Retraining up to 2 years may be funded to qualify you for available positions. So that could be an option too, if they deem that, we can offer you retraining, then that's within management's discretion again, but it's an option. Next slide, please. So possible outcomes. Outcome 1, you accept a reasonable job offer and are appointed. What happens next? Surplus status ends, you continue in the new position. So I think that's clear. Outcome 2, you request pay in lieu and resign early. So you may also deem that I don't want the 12-month surplus. I just want to I want to leave. I don't want to for whatever reason. But you can get pay in lieu up to 6 months salary plus your transition support measure and severance. So addition to transition support measure, there's severance on top of that as well. Outcome 3, you are not appointed within 12 to 16 months and are laid off. So that's the worst case scenario. 1 year layoff priority plus full TSM and severance. So even though you have been laid off, you would have priority for another year to reappointment to a position. There's no guarantee there. In the meantime, you're not in receipt of any salary other than what you've received in terms of the transition support measure and severance entitlement. Next slide, please. Okay, option B. So that's the transition support measure payment with and followed by an immediate resignation. So timing, you make a clean break from the public service within the 120-day opting period. You get a lump sum payment of between 4 and 52 weeks of pay based on your years of service, and then we'll look at a chart later to see what that is explicitly. Severance, so you would get on top of that 2 weeks for 1 year plus 1 week for each additional year of service. So that's the severance you would get on top of that. Vacation payout, full payout of all unused vacation. Benefits, insurance benefits may continue for up to 6 months or more, depending. We'll get into the entitlement to access to the public service health care plan and the public service dental care plan. We will discuss that too. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a transition support measure entitlement. So you see, if you have, this is based on your years of service, you would be entitled to a maximum of 52 weeks. So between 20 and 29 years, you get the full 52 weeks. After 29 years, it starts regressing, right? Between 30 and 39 years of service, it goes from 49 to 22. So this is an excerpt out of the policy. Next slide, please. Okay, option B, pension and financial planning. So when you choose option B, you may be eligible for early retirement pension waiver. And I want to explain, this is different from what you've been hearing in the media or what the government's been proposing with respect to the early retirement incentive. So I will explain the difference between the two. But first, let's go over what you are entitled to under your collective agreement, right? So if you are between the ages of 55 and 60, so these are members who were hired prior to 2013, that's when they made amendments to the to your pension plan, the Public Service Superannuation Act. So for previous members, for pre-2013 hires, you can retire, or normal retirement age is 55 to 60, or 60 to 65 post 2012. And you have at least 10 years of pensionable service. The waiver removes the 5% per year early retirement reduction. So under normal circumstances, if you don't meet for group one, if you're not 55 with normally 30 years of service, that's the magic number as we call it. Normally you would, if you don't meet that number, or if you're not at least 60, you would get a lifetime penalty of 5% per year for not meeting the threshold, right? If you're at 55 with 30 years, so until you reach 55 and 30, you're getting penalized. Same if you're not 60 years old and you don't have at least 30 years, you will get penalized 5% for every year until you reach 60. And this is a lifetime penalty. So the penalties are really severe for those who want to opt early without, who want to resign or retire early without meeting the minimum thresholds. However, under a workforce transition process as this one, they would waive the penalty, right? So under option B, you would they would waive that. So we advise folks who are contemplating retiring or who want to make sure that everything is accurate to contact the pension center, because maybe there's some previous time you could buy, or you want to make sure that the information is accurate. It may not be accurate. You want to make sure that's accurate before initiating the process, so that if it's not accurate, we can help you with that. And we recommend that you use the financial the counseling up to $1,200 under your collective agreement. So if you want to avail yourself of that, you should make the request to your management. It's a plan for tax and investment impacts, right? Or any other financial considerations. Next slide, please. Sorry. Now I want to talk about the early retirement incentive that the government is offering. It's not an additional package. Basically, what they're saying is, and again, it's subject to being passed at the House of Commons, right? Then it becomes law. But we don't have much information in terms of how it's going to otherwise unfold. We know about 60 or 70,000, between 65 and 70,000 people have already received the notice. That means we'll see that means they're within retirement age with at least 10 years of public service, similar to the above conditions here. But what it means is that you're not going to get an additional package. So if if I don't meet the minimum requirements, age 55 or 60, or age 60 or 65, I would normally be penalized. So but this early retirement incentive is available to all, affected or non-affected, who want to leave the public service without penalty. So they would use your current years of service and calculate it, provided that you're 10, you have at least 10 years, you're within 5 years of retirement, and they would waive any penalty. So if you're not 50, if you haven't reached the 30 years of service, they would waive it. So I'm 55 with 25 years of service, for example. They'll say, fine, we're not going to penalize you. You can retire based on these numbers, but you're not getting anything more by retiring, right? So if you're affected, and we would recommend that you avail yourself of the collective agreement provisions, because you have more protections here, including a transition support measure, education allowance. But those who are not affected, if you want to consider this once it becomes available, you need to be fully aware that you're not getting a package. You're not getting extra money. You're just going to leave with your public service pension intact based on the years of service you have. So your best 5 years with the amount of years of service. So that's the distinction I wanted to make. You're not getting anything extra by availing yourself eventually of the early retirement incentive. And these are for folks who are not affected, right? But those who are affected, we would not recommend you avail yourself of that. You would avail yourself of the enhanced protections under your collective agreement. So I wanted to make that distinction. Next slide, please. Okay, the education allowance. So you can leave with financial support for education and career transition. So you would receive your full transition support measure. So again, based on your years of service, between 4 and 52 weeks. Plus, you get an education allowance of up to $17,000 for tuition, books, and required fees in an approved program. Plus, you'd get severance and vacation payout, but this would involve your resignation from the public service. You may ask, well, what happens if I ever want to return to the public service? Nothing prevents you from doing so. If you secure another employment, but you have no guarantees, right? You have to compete with everyone else. So you're not being barred from being reintroduced in the public service. It's just that you're not afforded any priority rights because you availed yourself of option C. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, the transition support measure plus resignation, clean break. You will need to make your decision within 120 days. You receive your transition support measure, your severance, any unused vacation, other comp time not used can be cashed out, and you have entitlement to insurance benefits. Continue for up to 6 months or longer. We'll see based on the public service healthcare plan and the dental care plan, which I will address later. Next slide, sorry. Okay, so folks who want to so again, the option for C1 is no return to the public service. That's key. So if you want to avail yourself of that, you want a clean break, you choose option CI, small I. The only requirement from your end is proof of enrollment within 12 months, right? So again, it has to be a recognized, accredited education institution as per provincial legislation, right? So it has to be an approved program by the Ministry of Education. And the one requirement is that you need to provide proof of enrollment. If you take the other option is to take 2 years of leave without pay for education, and you keep linked to the public service. So those are folks who want to potentially return to the public service. They can take up to 2 years. They receive the transition support measure receive transmission at the end of the leave without pay period. And again, you have to provide proof of enrollment within 12 months. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, I spoke to earlier, eligible programs, university or college programs, degree, diploma, must be full-time or substantially part-time or substantial part-time enrollment. Again, depends on, professional certifications. What you would need to provide is receipts for tuition and mandatory fees for reimbursement. That makes sense. And so you need to provide your expenses to get reimbursement. And under option C, what's key here is you're not eligible for early retirement pension waiver because you're opting to remain whether you're leaving, so you're not retiring, or you want to remain on leave without pay for 2 years. Next slide, please. Okay, so we briefly touched on alternation earlier. What does it entail? An opting employee So surplus who wants to stay, and a non-affected employee willing to leave or retire will swap places, so to speak. So they exchange positions, the opting employee takes the other job, the other leaves with the transition support measure. Conditions, same equivalent group and level within 6% of pay. Both must meet qualifications, right? So again, we talked about earlier about salary protection. So it has to be within 6% of pay, or it can be an increase of 6%. Must find and approve an alternate within the 120-day opting period. So this is an important consideration. If you want to alternate, essentially, yeah, you have that 120 days in which to opt. Now, sometimes, depending on the employer, depending on your division section, there may be delays. Well, if you've already found a match and the employer is delaying its approval or is putting obstacles in place to deny the approval, we can challenge them and say, well, it's through your fault that, if it goes over 120 days. So depending on the circumstances, we would be able to obviously challenge the employer on that. Approvals, what's key though is you have to meet the essential qualifications of the job you want to alternate it into. So I'm affected, I got to meet the essential qualifications. Usually it involves language requirements, education, and other core competencies that may be required. So if you meet the minimum requirements, you should be able to alternate. For approvals, both employees consent in writing. Management must approve the exchange. Yes, they have final say, it's their discretion, but they have to exercise their discretion reasonably. And if they don't, and they deny it for no objective or reasonable, I should say reasonable reason, we can challenge. And usually will be based on not meeting the educational requirements, right? So, or language requirements. But usually for language for education, it could be education and or experience. So there's wiggle room there. But on the language requirements, that's tougher. If it requires bilingual, it's a bilingual position and you don't meet the criteria, then you won't be able to alternate. Next slide, please. Okay, salary protection. How does that work? So if appointed to a lower level position as part of transition, your salary is protected at your former rate. Salary protection includes increments and acting pay already earned. Protection continues until you're appointed to an equivalent or higher level. This removes financial barriers to accepting a lower level reasonable job offer. So the salary protection remains until you remain in the position. If you leave the position for another lower level, for example, the salary protection provisions do not follow. So here's just for illustrative purposes, here's an example. Before the transition, for example, your VM3, salary 120,000. After appointment to a lower level, so you receive the guarantee or reasonable job offer at a lower level, or within that 6% range at the VM2 level, we're still going to be paid at the VM3 salary, and salary protection applies. Later change, higher or equivalent, VM3 or, for example, VM3 or higher role obtained. You are paid at the new VM3 or higher rate, salary protection no longer needed, right? Because you're at equivalent level. So just to give you an example of how it works. Next slide, please. Meaningful work, retraining, and relocation. After surplus date, management must provide meaningful work that uses your skills. So when I was referring to that period, you're determined your surplus or within that 12-month period, or until you are offered a guarantee of a reasonable job offer, they must assign you meaningful work. Whether projects, temporary assignments, acting roles to help build competencies and to network. Retraining up to 2 years, fully funded, with full salary during training. Relocation may be required beyond 16 kilometers. Relocation expenses are covered, but surplus employees must be mobile. And again, you have to be mobile, but again, I need to take into consideration your personal circumstances. For example, you may have family obligations, and you can't just uproot your family and leave, right, for another position. So then it may be deemed unreasonable to do so, right? So again, it's very fact specific, situational, and we need to look at your personal circumstances, and the duty to accommodate, as a right under your collective agreement and the Canadian Human Rights Act is always in play, right? So they need to look at your personal circumstances and need to offer you accommodations where required and where requested, when requested. Next slide, please. Okay, so the early retirement, the pension waiver process, to recap, you're an opting employee with no guarantee of reasonable job offer. You choose option A or B, not option C, because that's the education allowance. You meet age and service requirements, eligible early retirement, plus enough pensionable service. The usual 5% yearly early retirement penalty is eliminated, and you would receive an unreduced immediate pension. Again, it's going to be based on your years of service, and you're not getting anything extra from a pension perspective. You're just not going to be penalized for not meeting the minimum threshold. And that's why we recommend you contact the pension center early for an estimate to determine if you have any deficiencies, if you can buy back any service to increase your years of service. It's always recommended to contact the pension center, and they will be able to provide you with those numbers and estimates. Next slide, please. Yeah, so financial benefits on leaving, severance pay, 2 weeks for 1 year, 1 week for each additional year of service. Again, all unused vacation, comp time is paid out. Insurance benefits would be maintained for a certain period. I say 6 months here, but I think we can go a bit longer, and we'll see that shortly. You would get support from PIPS in terms of helping you in any aspect related to whether it's a job search. I mean, we are unable to, we don't have access to the jobs themselves, but we know there are platforms, alternation platforms out there, and internally networking opportunities. We would assist with ensuring that your rights are protected, but we wouldn't be able to look for employment for you personally because we don't have access to the system, and we won't be able to assist in that regard. But we can facilitate networking. We can facilitate, discussions to ensure, because the idea is for those who want to remain in the public service to maximize those opportunities. And the financial planning, you would get up to $1,200, and we strongly recommend that you avail yourself of that option. Next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about coverage retention under the public service healthcare plan and public service dental care plan. So as an affecting opting surplus, still on strength. Coverage continues as an active employee. Sure, full benefits are afforded. If you're laid off after surplus, option A, outcome 3, and we'll go back to that as if you have not received after the 12-month surplus period, if you haven't been able to secure employment, you would be laid off. But you may keep your public service healthcare plan benefits for up to a year or until your pension starts. So if you retire, then you would have access to the retiree public service healthcare plan, right? So you still have access upon retirement. You may also keep your eligibility to and access to the dental care plan for up to a year from layoff. But the employee will pay the required contribution. So currently you don't pay anything for your dental care plan, but as a person who's been laid off, you would incur additional costs, right, in terms of the health, in terms of paying your share of contributions and the employers. And that's why it's important for us to ensure that you are aware of the consequences, because if you go on leave without pay, it'll impact your pension contributions. If you want to count that time as pensionable service, that is, if you choose the education allowance up to 2 years, that can be pensionable, but you'll be responsible for your share contributions and the employer share, right? So you're assuming 100% of the contributions, and there's a cost associated to that. So you want to make sure you're aware of that and you have all those numbers before you make a decision, because it'll cost you more. You're on leave without pay, you're affected, or you've been affected or you've been laid off, your contributions will rise. So if you leave with immediate pension under workforce adjustment, yes, you may continue as a pensioner, and similarly for the dental care plan. If you resign with the transition support measure, options B or C, no immediate pension, public service healthcare plan ends at termination date, no 1 year continuation as laid off. Same for the dental care plan. Next slide, please. Okay, employee responsibilities, actively seek employment, alternative employment, consider all reasonable opportunities, retraining, relocation, lower level position, acting assignments. If you're an opting employee, submit your option choice within 120 days, attend meetings, respond to communications, and keep your contact information current. I believe that's is there one more slide, I believe? No, okay, perfect. Sorry, I was trying to navigate as fast as possible, and then I turn it over to you, Felipe, for any questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Dean and Stephanie behind the scenes for all the information. We will now take some time to answer as many questions as we can about this ET process. If you'd like to ask our panelists a question, please use the Q&A tool located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll do our best to answer your questions now. But if we do run out of time or you think of a question post-webinar, please reach out to your local steward or send us a message through the Ask Us form. We'll send those links in the chat at the end of the session. We'll look to provide all participants with a webinar recording and resources we mentioned today, so keep an eye out for that in your email in the next following weeks. Now we can get into the questions. This one sort of, two people asked a similar question. If a surplus employee selects option A and goes into a 1-year priority status, what happens if they get pregnant during that time? Does it pause if I go on mat leave before the 1-year period is over? Similarly, other folks had questions about just mat leave in general, and how that is impacted in this process.
No, great question. We are having actually these discussions with Treasury Board too on protected leave. So this would be considered a protected leave, because we know when you go on maternity leave, you sign you have they're an obligation. You go on mat leave, you're supposed to come back for the equivalent of time you were on leave. What happens then? Great question. We are of the opinion that you should remain entitled and return to the position. But we're waiting for direction, because we consider this protected leave. So whether you're on sick leave on sick leave, you're on you're going on maternity leave. So we'll provide a more definite answer to that because of the implication. So we'll get back to you on that. It is an important question that we are looking into.
The next question we have here is, can the assessment and selection process be skipped if a geographical location of various members of a work unit is a factor in determining positions to be surplused?
Sorry, so can you repeat that? Sorry.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Can the assessment and selection process be skipped if geographical location of various members of a work unit is a factor in determining positions to be surplused, or that will be surplused?
Well, no, depends again. If the selection retention process will be engaged if there are more folks than positions available. So regardless of the issue, they would still have to go through the process, because they because they're not getting a guarantee of a reasonable job offer. So that's the process, right? You're not in receipt of a reasonable guarantee of a reasonable job offer. You don't want to be an opting employee. You want to participate in the process.
The next question here says, if you refuse a GRJO, I thought the ETP states that if you're on surplus priority, you are guaranteed 6 months of surplus priority. If after the 6 months, then you only get 1 month notification before being laid off.
Yep. That's correct.
Clarifying.
Yeah. Minimum 6 months. Yeah.
Yep. Just looking for confirmation here. May you confirm that the alteration is not available during the 12-month surplus priority?
It is. It is available. You can avail yourself. Now, the argument is, can we do it within the 120 days? The alternation, right? So it's all time specific and depends on the circumstances. But yes, even as a surplus, if you have surplus priority, you've chose option A, you can still alternate. But where the debate lies is if it's done, it needs to be done within the 120 days, and we need to know, well, how far are we in the process? If within the first 90 days you found, or earlier, an alternation opportunity and management drags its feet, well, then we can argue, well, you've made that, you found a match. We're waiting for management's decision, and it shouldn't be held against. Should say, oh, it wasn't done within the 120 days because of management. Lack of pursuing the process. So it all depends, but yes, you can within the 12 months alternate.
The next one here is, where do we find what is considered an approved program?
So that would be based on, so any program, look it up depending. So if it's recognized, educational institutions, right? You look them up. You want to make sure they're accredited and that they meet the educational requirements. And if you're not sure, you can always call the Ministry of Education and ensure are they approved. But usually, any college, university, obviously, vocational training, they would meet that criteria. But if you're unsure, you can always check with the Ministry of Education.
Next question here, is the pension penalty waiver only available for option B?
No, yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay. Just looking for a few more to switch it up here. Regarding option C, you're not eligible for early retirement waiver slide. If I take option C after 24 months of leave without pay, I'll be 55 years old, and so I'm considered being laid off. Can I be eligible for early retirement waiver? Maybe this is a good time to talk about the ERI.
Well, if you're pre, so again, you have to be 50 if you're pre 2013, you have to be 55 with 30 years, right? To be able to retire. But I think for the ERI, early retirement incentive, we don't know. I think it's within a year. We need more information because it's not clear. Once the legislation passes, we'll know how much time you have once it's. From what we've received so far is you have a year to make that decision. But again, it's subject to approval, and it may change once it may not pass the House. It may be amended. But for the early retirement incentive, it's within that whenever they make that announcement, and you have that 1 year opportunity. So it depends where you fall. But if you're at least 55, or you'll be 60 at the end of the 2-year leave without pay, you can retire absolutely without penalty.
Next question here, just saw it. Does years of service include time off on sick leave without pay? Would that count?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Any other type, leave. Certain leave may not be. Certain leave does count. Others, maternity leave, sick leave without pay, usually that counts. Other type of leave, education. If you take the education leave would count. But if, for example, you're on spousal relocation or whatnot, there are certain ones that do not necessarily apply. But for the protected leave, we call, parental obligations, family, personal, illness, disability, that is covered.
We'll wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for your questions today. If we didn't get to your question or you think of one after the webinar, please take a moment to review our comprehensive CFIA ET process FAQs, which are found on our website. Reach out to your local steward or contact us through the Ask Us form. The links are all in the chat, or will be very soon if they're not already. Thank you again to Stephanie and Dean, as well as Niall behind the scenes, for being with us today. Once again, we've included the links to the available ET process resources in the chat. You'll find our webpage with up-to-date FAQs and resources. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to your local steward or contact us using the Ask Us form. Thank you to everybody, and we hope you have a wonderful day.